Hello, everyone, and welcome back to 365 Explained. This is our second episode. We're still refining the format a little bit, but my name's Zach Bennett, and I'm joined by Ben. And today we're going to be talking about Copilot Notebooks.
My favorite thing.
Yeah, your very favorite thing.
Almost like it's a coincidence.
Yeah. So maybe Ben, we could start with a little bit around what Copilot Notebooks is, and then we'll jump into a screen share, and we'll explain it a little bit for the audio listeners as well, about what Copilot Notebooks is.
Yeah, absolutely. So Copilot Notebooks is part of the evolution, the journey, if you will, that Microsoft has been going on with Copilot over the last year, 18 months, I guess, almost now. And there's been a few kind of cool things that are starting to roll out that help with the overall story around how you can use Copilot and how you can kind of join the disjointed bits of Copilot together. But I think you'll see, because I think I've been using this a little bit more than you have, that we're better, but we're still not 100% of the way there with joining things up. But those developments, the kind of most exciting recent ones have been the advanced agents. So we have Facilitator agent for helping you inside teams, channels, and environments and meetings with taking notes and answering questions about your team's data. We have two frontier agents, which are researcher and analyst. Analyst, you can throw kind of data sources at it. So CSVs, Excel files, they don't have to match, but they all should be, if you want a sensible answer, be around the same theme. An analyst will go through a multi-step process to kind of tidy that data, sort it out, try and mix it together, merge it. I haven't played with that myself yet, but it's like kind of word of caution when you're dealing with numbers and figures that you need to watch those hallucinations and make sure that you're getting good answers. But anyway, then there's Researcher, which is, again, a multi-step process where you can ask the Copilot Researcher agent a question. The more detail you give it in the inputs, the better kind of shapes the output would be. And we've used it. We can show an example for researching information about Copilot Notebooks, how they work, what the plus points, the negative points are. And you get, again, like instead of standard Copilot where it goes and does a search, a query, passes the results and gives you an answer, Researcher goes through multiple iterations through the data that it gets back, and it branches out to give you kind of good answers. How notebooks fit into that picture is notebooks are a way of grounding your interactions with Copilot through a curated set of information, right? So you create a notebook, you attach sources or references into that notebook, which we'll talk about in a minute or two, and then you can ask it questions and it will ground and give you answers from the data that you have provided as references. Right? How's that for a 101?
Sounds great to me. I mean, just to mention, you mentioned that Researcher. That was something that I did, this morning prepping for this podcast. I went in and asked it about Copilot Notebooks, and it gave me a lot of information. It did a lot of digging and
yeah.
I almost needed a Copilot to go through the amount of information that it gave me to then tell me what was relevant.
Well, and this is the challenge, right? That I have a paid up subscription for OpenAI's ChatGPT as well. I've dabbled a tiny bit with Gemini. I played a little bit with Notebook LLM. Is it Notebook LM? And you can see what all of these kind of tools are striving to do. And Copilot Notebooks is good that it's a step towards this kind of future of being able to properly work collaboratively with Copilot, with an AI agent. But it's also frustrating because that point you said there about you went and asked questions in Researcher, it's what do you then do with that data? How do you then work with that data? What do you do with it? And Notebooks gets you part of the way there because it's Copilot. I mean, hey, we might as well kind of show this right on the thing. So if in my screen share, I go into the main Copilot webpage, I'm doing all of this through this Copilot because this has the kind of modern interface, if you like, and you can tell which one you've got because down the left-hand side, you have a slightly reorganized structure where you have chats, then agents, then notebooks, then creates, then other apps. And this is what Microsoft is driving to be the new homepage for M365, right? So there was this announcement, wasn't there, that they were kind of renaming the M365 app to be Copilot M365. And this is why, because this is to become the landing page, the new homepage experience. But under my researcher agent, I can go and I can ask it a question, and I can see my history of, explaining Copilot Notebooks. If I click on that interaction, you can see kind of the question I asked it, like Copilot Notebooks are new. I want to come up with something to talk about. Give me 3 good points, 3 bad points. It asks a clarifying question. And then I'm like, I want it to be for an IT pro use case. And then I get this massive screed of data. The challenge is that data is not stuck here because I can pull it out, but I can't kind of then interact with it or ask it questions or dig through that or get summaries. There is the button at the bottom to push this into what are called Copilot pages, and Copilot pages are effectively loop components. So this is the workflow, right? Is I take my data, I put it in a loop page, and I put that loop page into my notebook, and then I can ask it information. So if on the left menu, I go down into notebooks, you can see I've got one here called the M365 IT Pro Notebook, which is what I have called it and named it. If I click into that, I've then got my sources listed at the bottom of the screen, and I can go in and I can find, and visually there's a little indicator to say, this is a linked source coming out of Loop. So it's a Loop page, and we'll talk a little bit later about what sources we can have in here. But if I click on that, this is that screen of text that I got back out of Agent, and I can open a chat window to interrogate specifically against that data. So I could ask in here, give me a bullet summary of sources used for notebooks. And it will not go to the web, which is a good and a bad thing. And it will give me a reply out of that content, only if the answer is available inside my content. So this is, we were playing with this just before, weren't we? That sometimes you want to be able to modify the content or work with it interactively. That is not what notebooks let you do, right? They don't do that at this point.
Yeah, I think that's a key thing for me. Maybe that's something that's coming in the future. But if you've ever used anything like the agents in GitHub Copilot, that will make changes to your code for you, I think that would be a great addition to this pop-out window. You interrogate your data. You say, I want to remove all all mentions of this, something like that, for example, and then having a button within that Copilot window to be able to, make those changes for you, I think it'd be super helpful.
And that's what ChatGPT has with their canvas. So
Yeah.
they can, you can make a project, which is similar to a notebook, but when you're interacting on content, it reaches a point where it gets fed up of you constantly kind of changing and revising in the flow. So you can push that into a canvas page. And then when you ask it questions, it will edit the canvas in real time, or you can edit the canvas. And you can work on it a little bit more interactively. That's what I kind of thought this was going to be a little bit closer to, but it's not. You still have to manually you dead end yourself and have to copy that content and replace it back in something.
Yeah. And then it's, have I copied it into the right place? Have I got rid of the right thing? You get those sorts of questions come up as well.
Yeah. So you can see my question, I asked give me a bullet style summary, and I've now got, it's come back with bullets. It's given me them down the side. But if I want to do anything with those, I'm still stuck in I have to edit that in Pages, or I have to copy and paste it out into whatever I want to do. And this is where there's kind of a bit of a mental block with this stuff, that it's, it's kind of partway there, but not quite, not yet. And I don't know if it's Microsoft has missed the mark on it, or if it's part of the ever evolving way that these are working. It's like, this is just how it is today, and tomorrow, next week, it'll be better. I think looking at the other tools on the market, they have to be following this direction with this stuff, right?
Yeah, I agree. And Microsoft are usually pretty good at that. They'll come out with something and then, they'll iterate on it. It's not going to be the final thing that comes in and stays.
Yep.
One thing that I did like specifically on this notebooks page was up at the top for your specific notebook, you can edit those Copilot instructions. So you can kind of feed it, prompt-like scenarios directly into your notebook.
It's tuning, right?
Yeah.
So it's like telling it information about your writing style. I believe you told it you like to write like a pirate in one of your test ones, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But what I've done here is, for my different sources, this notebook that I've created, I've input as sources a whole bunch of content that I've written, and I use it to then help kind of refine and format stuff into kind of something that's a bit more like my voice. So in my instructions, I've got a set of data about, I'm an IT pro based in the UK. I like Copilot. I'm excited by Copilot, productivity and collaboration tools, Loop, etc. But then these specific instructions here, I want the tone to be professional, conversational, minimize hyperbole, don't use EM dashes particularly, keep emoji use to a minimum. And then I tell it a little bit about my sources as well. So it's like, for video content, assume people are skimming. The reference material I've got contains the transcript of the content that I created, the message that I want to convey, the links that I use. So I'm helping kind of, hopefully it understands the sources that I have provided into that. And sorry, just one thing while I remember, Microsoft is producing a enterprise level way of doing this, right? So you can kind of tune Copilot to your specific organization, but that is only for organizations that have 5,000 Copilot seats
Okay.
or higher. This is kind of, again, it's like a hybrid or a halfway house that for me, for my personal stuff, I can tune these instructions, and we are getting memory into normal Copilot as well. And then we have the organizational styling, if you like, for big orgs.
Yeah. This Copilot instructions, like yours was very detailed there. You gave it a lot of information. So, I hear sometimes when people use Copilot, they go, "Oh, I don't like what it give me back. I don't, this is perfect." The more information you give it to be able to fine tune, its output to you, the happier you're going to be, the less revisions you'll have to make to that to be able to,
What? And the thing is that I didn't seed that, right? So I took some of my long form interactions with Copilot from other places, and I told it, I want to start a new conversation thread, but I want to get that thread up to speed with what we've discussed. Give me a set of instructions that I can take from this chat to use in my next chat. And that's what I used as the basis for that. So I didn't copy a wholesale, but that's where a bulk of that
Interesting.
came from. And in the Copilot chats I'd had with the loops, where I was working on, I've had that very detailed breakdown of, this is the transcript, this is the social post, this is the video, whatever data. Again, I asked it in that, please explain to me the format of this page so I can use it to make another page. So I combined all of those different elements to then become my instructions.
Yeah.
And, not starting from scratch where I don't have to.
That's great. Why don't you tell me about this references section then? Because you mentioned before that these are a list of documents. Are you feeding this information directly into the notebooks, or is it going off and finding that proactively for you?
So the references is there's the two things that make a notebook special. The first one we've just talked about is the instructions. The second is the references. And the references are restricted in a fashion in that you can only have 20 of them per notebook. You can add more, but it will only reference the latest 20. The reference material itself can be a Word document, a PowerPoint document, a PDF document, a OneNote page. So how OneNote is structured is you have notebook sections and pages. It can only be a page out of a notebook, or it can be a loop page, right? Or a Copilot page, because a Copilot page is a loop page by another name. But that's why on my screen here, I've got a Word document with a little, hyperlink icon. That is a Word document. And there are restrictions here as well, because it's slightly confusing in the UI. You can kind of add a reference and start typing, and it will find stuff from, your most recent, in the same way that if you do / in Copilot, it'll bring up your most recent stuff. Or I can upload a file, or I can hit on the link button. If you hit the link button, it's a bit confusing because it gives you the option to paste in a web URL. That web URL has to be a URL into your tenant to one of those supported documents. Otherwise, it throws a fit at you. Now, I did test. I had a Word document on an open web, not on another tenant. It was actually on one of my web hosts just out on the internet. It wouldn't accept that as a source. Like, it has to be somewhere inside your environment. Now, again, some of the other tools out there are a little bit more open in this regard, that you can have specific website. So like I could pass it through my blog or, particular LinkedIn pages or whatever it may be. You can't have that. So those references are restricted at the moment. And when you've got them in there, you get these kind of soft categories where you can filter to show me only the pages, the Word documents, the PowerPoints. And weirdly, there's a quirk that it won't show you PDFs, like it shows in the big body list. So I've got a couple of PDFs, which are some of my like Office 365 writings in the MS 700 book, but it won't give me a filter for them.
But it is still using those as references.
But it's still using those as references, assuming you don't have more than 20. Yeah. And this is the again, the plus and the negative point, that when I ask Copilot a question, the notebook Copilot, so I've got the big old, standard Copilot chat book, it is only going to give me an answer through this. So we had a question about like, well, what's the licensing for Copilot notebooks? I asked Internet Copilot and Notebook Copilot the same question, and we had slightly different responses because it depends if Notebook Copilot has the data in its reference bank, right? And to your point about like, are these uploaded? Are these linked? The whole idea is that this is dynamic. So as those sources change, and whatever notebook or Word document I'm referencing, as that is updated, the answer I'd get would filter live through that data. So it's kind of like the general M365 Copilot. You can reference one or two sources of data. This is like a superpower version of that, where you're referencing 20 bits of data in one go, and you're carefully curating and focusing it to look through that data. And this is where, when we talk about use cases, it'll suit some use cases and not other use cases quite nicely.
Yeah. So for example, if I had a shared loop with someone, is that something that I could add as a reference in here?
Yeah, as long as your user account has permissions to it, you get the link for it, you paste it in here, and yeah, you would be able to interact with it from there.
I noticed as well on this notebooks page, the play audio button. What's that?
Yeah, so this is, I'm not sure how useful this is to me personally, and I get the impression that this is something that is available because the underlying model supports this. This is something that ChatGPT and Notebook LM in particular did. Is if I hit that play audio button, it will go away and it will generate the first time, and it'll take like 2-3 minutes, and then I don't know what the frequency of when you change the sources, how it updates the audio, but what it will do is you have two voices speaking in a podcast style format about the content that is referenced. And you can then kind of skip and play through. You can delete it and regenerate it if you need to. I don't think you can download it. But again, this is back to the different use cases where notebooks would be good and when they would be bad. If you had a topic that you needed to research, or a topic that you needed to get up to speed on, like, or a customer issue or something, in theory, you could make a notebook, throw all of the data in there, generate the audio clip, and then listen to it as a way of getting up to speed or understanding the key points out of what that data, is, if you like.
Yeah, it's very interesting. So let's say you put that audio together, or the notebooks in general. Is it more of a private, personal thing? You're creating your own, or are you able to share these out with other people inside your organization or even outside?
Yeah, so the notebooks for the time being are personal only. So again, visually, when you're in the notebook, it's not necessarily the most obvious, but up in the top right is a little padlock icon that says this is a private notebook. Now, I would hope that because that's a UI choice that has been made, that in future there will be a way of sharing a notebook with somebody else. But this is where we start blurring the line with the agents, right? So we mentioned the facilitator agent that lives inside Teams and helps you with team-orientated tasks. That's maybe where, if you have something that you need to work on data inside Teams, you would interact with the facilitator notebook. For the time being, notebooks, agents. For the time being, notebooks are personal only. And then again, that's kind of, this is the biggest confusion or downside around adoption for these things, is there's almost too many, well, what do I use where, and what should I have in what scenario, right? So I need to know and think about it in the context of my personal workflow, that this is something I can use to help me. And then again, I have to take that data, put it somewhere else, and then share it. Now, the output from a notebook, I can share into a notebook page. That is a loop page, which is slightly separate from a Copilot page, which is also a loop page. So you have like these three things, which are actually just loop pages underneath. It's like, all the people in a trench coat, right? Or Scooby-Doo pulling the masks
Yeah.
off. And I can share that through the power of loop. I can take that component, I can drop it somewhere else, but people can't then use my custom instructions or my other reference sources, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. So you effectively, you can get access to maybe that underlying data, but then, some of the special notebook stuff that happens on top, those users won't get
Yes.
access
Yeah,
to.
yeah, yeah.
Well, maybe we skipped over this a little bit, but what about licensing? Is this going to be included for everyone? Is it a subset of people? How am I going to be able to get access to this notebooks if I want to give it a go?
Yeah, so they were in preview for a little while, and then they were announced as GA a build. It took my tenant about 3-4 weeks post build to actually have it land and be accessible. But strictly speaking, the licensing is you need to have an M365 Copilot license. Now, in terms of the actual storage here, and this is again where it's interesting versus Loop, the notebook itself is stored inside a SharePoint embedded container. SharePoint embedded is a storage only SharePoint site. So kind of like the document library component of SharePoint without any of the web gubbins and any of that sort of stuff. And it is a container that applications can access so that they can take advantage of the recycle bin, of retention, of all the good compliance stuff, but they are separate from a specific SharePoint site. Now, in the Loop licensing, this was one of the differentiators we talked about last time, that, if you have an M or a O365 license, you could use Loop, but you couldn't create a Loop workspace. The Loop workspace was a SharePoint embedded site. Now, actually, when you open Loop, you will see that you have a personal My Workspace. That is a SharePoint embedded container permissioned only to you. The other workspaces that you can create are SharePoint embedded workspace permission to other people. That's the differentiator in Loop between a M-E5 license and an O or a M-E3 license, is you get the personal workspace, but you can't create the organizational workspaces. The reason I'm covering all that old ground, is that when you create a Copilot notebook, it's using the container that your Loop My Workspace comes into. So when we were chatting just before, we said, well, how come you can use notebooks, but you couldn't use the workspaces because you don't have the ME plan?
Yep.
It's because you still have a personal My Workspace in Loop. That's where Copilot Notebooks is storing the data. So these pages, these chats are going into that SharePoint embedded container. There are things to consider there around, data retention and what happens for ads moves, user changes, all that kind of jazz. And there will be some knock-on impacts from licensing. So what happens if the user has an M365 license, but not a OneDrive license, or not got the Loop app enabled? I would imagine that kind of starts restricting down. But in theory, Microsoft just lists, no, you need an M365 Copilot license. You don't need anything else. But I would say you need to have, to get proper advantage of it, a SharePoint, a OneDrive, and a Loop license at the same time.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, maybe let's start to wrap up. We can usually like to talk around some kind of use cases, or things that we would we even use these sorts of things?
What do you want to go first? Shall I ask you a question this time? Like,
Go on.
what use cases can you see you using it for? And don't take my one.
So one use case for me. Last time we did this podcast, we spoke about Loop, and that actually made me use Loop more. So I've started to use Loop as, customer, because I do a lot, with end customers. So I'll create, a kind of Loop page per customer and go through that, add all the information in there. The first thing that I thought with this Copilot Notebooks is being able to have a notebook, maybe per customer, for example, something like that.
Yep.
And add those Loop pages in, drop the proposal in, drop any sort of workshop information that we've done. And if this customer comes back to me, 3, 6 months after deployment and they ask me a question, I can jump straight into here. And, once I've added those Copilot instructions, you were the consultant that, rolled this out and did all this information.
Yeah.
Interrogate that data, because I know that the data is going to be good data because it's my references that I'm putting in there.
Yeah.
And we were talking around the sharing aspect, even just that, we don't know if it's coming in the future, but hopefully it is. Me being able to share that notebook with another consultant and being able to listen to the audio on this, you're going to look after this consultant now. This customer now.
You could almost like a holiday handover or something, couldn't
Exactly.
you? Of here's all of my interactions with this particular customer that are relevant to the project.
Yeah.
This is how you can get up to speed. This is what, where you can ask it questions. And this is where this is frustrating for me. It's frustrating because I really love it. I'm so excited for it, but it just falls short slightly of that hurdle of you can't share it or you can't interact with it, or actually is a notebook the right use case for that? You almost want like an agent that will look at or deal with all that data, isn't it? It's like we're almost there.
Yeah, we're almost. And, I think I genuinely will use this. I'll give it a go and, for myself, put those loop references. It's a great bit of information that, 20 max, because that will almost make you try and curate exactly what you put in. You don't just want to give it loads.
You be more conscious.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, so my use case, and I know you do something similar with creating LinkedIn videos and things. It's something I've been dabbling with for the last couple of months, and that's what I'm finding this really helpful for, is adjusting something to sound how I sound, or helping me with creating an outline script for something in the style of what I want it to be, what I would do. So instead of just kind of taking wholesale, what a generic AI has given me, it's kind of refining it to be more personal to what I would use. So that's why a lot of my sources in here, I have these kind of videos. Again, like if I click on one of these here, you can see I've got like the research that I did. I've got the transcript of what I actually said in a video. And then in the main Copilot, I can paste in a transcript from a new video, not as a reference, not as a source, but say, this is what I said. Help me create a LinkedIn post or a summary of what I said that I can then take to go do something else. And then I will take that output, I will tweak it, and I will feed that back in as another source for future. And I need to have a think about what happens when I start hitting up against that 20 limit, right? Because at the moment, I've got every video I've done as a separate source. Actually, that can probably just be one source, of like, here's the last 20 things that I did and inputting it. So that, to me, that's when Notebooks works really well, because that is a personal use case. The instructions fit really nicely. The references fit really nicely of, these are examples of what I have done. And I did actually, there was, I think one of the videos I did just recently was I did my own mini explainer of Copilot Notebooks. And without feeding that in as a source, I fed in my research that I had used to make my own video. And I said to the Copilot Notebook, make me a script that should be about 1 to 2 minutes long to talk about Copilot Notebooks. And then I recorded wholesale what it gave me.
Interesting.
So you've got my version of it, and you've got the Copilot Notebook suggested version of what it thinks I would have said. And it's not a million miles out. It was kind of an interesting comparison. But that, to me, is what I like. What I see as a good use case to this is the help me do stuff in the style that I would do something.
Yeah, for sure.
So there we go. But this is nascent stuff, and it is. There's a lot of ways that you can combine those frontier agents, the research, the notebooks. I'm very curious to hear how people are using this, because, like I say, that's where the magic of this is for the time being. Like, while these agents and components are all slightly clunky and slightly individualized, seeing how other people do it or hearing how other people are thinking about these things is why this is fun. It's like why we have done consultancy at various points in the past, right? Because you get to play with it and hear how other people are. So please, anybody out there, like, let us know. Like, I'm curious, and this is our second episode. Who knows what episode 3 will be about? But I'd love to have some ideas of where we can take this and what we can pick to untangle next.
Episode 3 will be whatever you fall in love with next, Ben. That's what episode 3 will be.
Do you reckon? Do we not need to do one on cues? Do we not need to?
Oh, I'm in love with cues for sure.
Can you use cues with Copilot?
I don't know. Well,
okay, maybe coming to a queue near you soon.
Yeah.
I'll find out at Comsverse, right?
Yeah, perfect place. I mean, that's probably a nice place to end off as well. Again, let us know if you're going to give Copilot Notebooks a go, like Ben said. Any ideas for future episodes, reach out to us, on LinkedIn or YouTube, wherever you end up finding this podcast. I'm sure we'll love to have a chat. And we'll see you on episode 3. Cheers, all.
Sounds good to me. Thanks, Zach.
Bye.
Bye.